Maurice Nicol, Psychological Commentaries, Volume 1, based on the work with Gurdjieff. Birdlip, February 14, 1942. The Law of Seven, Part 1. The process of creation by means of the three forces proceeding from the Absolute has been traced as far as World 96. It has been explained that as creation proceeds by the action of the multiplication of the three forces on every plane or level of creation, the density of laws increases. That is, the further the process of creation proceeds from the Absolute, the more restrictions will appear until in World 96, which in our particular ray of creation is our moon and is the terminal point of the ray, the number of laws or restrictions reaches its maximum. We have now to consider a further law that restricts creation, the Law of Seven. Creation proceeds through increasing restrictions. The law of three necessarily produces increasing restrictions, but the law of seven adds further limitations. It has already been seen that the earth comes very far down in the ray of creation and is under 48 orders of laws, and that only 1 degree or level of creation exists below it, represented by the moon. This means that the position of the earth on the creative process is very bad, and only one worse position exists where there are double the number of restrictions. But regarded from the standpoint of the second fundamental law behind all things, namely the law of seven, the position of the earth is still more unenviable. Let us try to understand what this means. The law of seven applies to the order of the manifestation of creation, and it is in this word, order, that we shall find its supreme meaning. It is necessary to understand clearly that there is a law of order apart from the law of creation. Creation is arranged in order, and it is ordered in a certain way. At certain points in this order, difficulties appear, and the earth is situated at one of the points where difficulties in the ordering of stages of creation inevitably arise. It has already been seen that the primal three forces of creation proceed from the Absolute as their source and in turn create further forces. We might imagine that these three forces proceed downwards without check. But this is not the case. They are checked at 2 points by reason of the law of seven. Let us try to understand these points of check by means of a visual representation. Let us imagine a tube composed of some elastic substance with 2 constrictions in it. And let us suppose that water is poured into this tube at the top. We can represent the tube as follows. You will see that as the passage of water, which can take as representing force, is held up by 2 places in its descent in the tube. Now let us apply this image to the ray of creation, as given so far in the following way. At the same time, adding the notes do, si, la, etc., you will notice that the first tone of the scale, namely do, has been placed at the level of the Absolute. The second tone, C, at the level of world 3, and tone La at the level of world 6, and so on, until Re is reached at the level of the moon. Now, if the major scale be taken, 2 points are formed in it where the intervals between the notes are not full tones, but semitones. Those points correspond to Do, Si, and Fa, Mi. Actually, the major scale was constructed to illustrate the ray of creation by unknown people belonging to some unknown school. It was constructed to illustrate the law of seven, or law of octave. In terms of the musical scale, we can speak of the interval between Do and Si as the place of a missing semitone, and in the same way of the interval between Fa and Mi. The whole ray can be called an octave in which the Absolute sounds the first Do, but we do not know the existence of the lower Do. The moon always turns exactly the same side to us, although it is revolving and we do not know what lies behind it. The first constriction or place of a missing semitone appears then between the Absolute and the world 3. that is, between Do and C, and the second constriction appears between world 24 and world 48, that is, between Fa and Mi. This means that the passage of force is held up at these two places owing to the nature of the law of 7. And here, a shock is necessary. Between C and Fa, forces pass freely, and again between Mi and Re. But between Do and C, a check occurs, and between Fa and Mi, a second check occurs. This is in the nature of things. That is, it arises from one of the two fundamental laws behind all things. It is not a question of why it is so. For a fundamental law means that a law cannot be reduced further and so cannot be explained further in terms of everything else. It is like saying that there are positive and negative charges of electricity. It is not a question of why, it is so, and nothing more can be said save that the law of 3 and the law of 7 are so. So you must understand that if ultimately nothing were so, nothing would exist. Something must fundamentally be so for things to exist at all. So you can explain the chair you are sitting on in terms of wood, and wood in terms of cells, and cells in terms of molecules, and molecules in terms of atoms, and atoms finally in terms of positive and negative charges of electricity. But you can go no further here. You're reaching down to the two forces belonging to the law of 3 forces, and the law is fundamental. It is so, and there is nothing beyond save absolute, which is beyond human understanding. To reduce the universe to one law, which is the dream of science, would be to understand the mind of the absolute. The work reduces the universe to 2 laws, at the same time indicating the existence of one law. The law of 7 inevitably brings about the order of created things and produces at the same time 2 points of constriction, or checks in that order, to the forces passing down the ray. How are these places of checks surmounted? First check, between the absolute and the world 3, is overcome by the shock of the will of the absolute. For that reason, it was said that the creation is by the will of the absolute through the primal 3 forces. But in the case of the second place of the check of the ray, the matter is different. The will of the absolute does not reach this point, and therefore something must be created at this point to act as a shock. It is here that man appears. It has already been said that man does not appear in the ray of creation as given so far in gigantic scale. Only the earth appears, but in order to enable the forces coming down the ray to pass easily to the earth and the moon, an apparatus must be created between the notes Fa and Mi, that is, between the planets taken as one whole and the earth taken as a part. For this purpose, a small octave is created from the level of creation, externally represented by the sun. At the level of the sun, this octave sounds the note Do, or rather the sun sounds the note Do. At the level of the planets, it sounds the note Si. Between the planets and the earth, it sounds 3 notes, La, Sol, Fa. Then it passes into the earth as the note Mi, and reaches the moon as the note Re. The 3 notes, La, Sol, Fa, that are sounded between the planets and the earth form organic life. Organic life is a sensitive living film that lies over the surface of the earth and acts as a transmitter of the forces passing between the upper and lower parts of the ray. Man is part of organic life, and it is in this specially created apparatus for transmission that he appears in the ray itself. By organic life is meant every form of life on earth, the human race, all animals, birds, reptiles, insects, fishes, all trees, plants, every form of vegetation, down to the most minute living cells. This sensitive film, which collects influences from the upper part of the ray and transmits them to the Earth and the Moon, is created from the level of the Sun, and its appearance in the great ray of creation is due to the point of check, where a shock is needed between the notes fa and mi, arising from the nature of the law of 7.